Okay. First thing we have to do is there's 3 screws on the back of this side piece to my case here. I already took them off, but as you can see, it's like so. Open her up. Alright, so here, you have a good angle.
Yeah.
I still have all my wires connected to my fans. That's kind of a minor detail. The most important part, what this is all based off of, is your motherboard. If you can see back there, it's this big square piece where all your electronics hook into. I have a liquid cooling unit that cools my PC. Well, I also have fans that blow inward and outward. It comes with I still have the power of the electricity onto the computer itself as well. That's why you're seeing all the glowing lights. But if you take a look right here, this is a 1060 Ti. It's basically what's able to render the graphics in order to run the game itself. Down at the bottom, you have your power supply. This is a 750 GQ. Pretty basic power supply itself. We also have 2 sticks of RAM, 8 gigabytes apiece, so I'm running 16 gigabytes altogether. And if you kind of look down in this corner here, there's a speaker. If I ever were to have any problems with my computer, that it tells me through alarms. It's kind of a series of beeping. So basically, when I was getting started, I also have an SSD card down here. It's in the slot. Just another way to hold on to more memory. So the most difficult thing about building the PC itself was probably that there's no one clear tutorial on how to put together your PC. You kind of get a manual with your motherboard, and it's kind of like an old school before technology thing, where you're kind of following the guidelines of your manual and kind of basing off some YouTube videos of what you could possibly find when putting together your PC. But basically, all the electronics on the motherboard, there's certain pins and certain slots or certain things have to hook up into in order for your PC to run correctly. It probably took us about 5 tries altogether to get it to run smoothly because there were mistakes made. Biggest problem was probably down here. If you can see the set of pins right here, and that was kind of towards the end of it all. I don't have the best cable management, but it doesn't look too sloppy in here. The reason why I have a really big case on this is to help with the cooling climate inside the computer as it's running. If I'm running any software or any games that are a little over demanding, or not over demanding, but really demanding, it kind of helps in that situation as far as being spaced out with the heat and having plenty of room to escape and keep on ticking.
How long would you say it took to build this being your first computer?
I would say it took us about 2.5, maybe 3 hours. And I didn't have it all at once, which would have made it really convenient. But just kind of going through the motions, I'd say altogether about 2.5 to 3 hours.
Did you feel like it was very hard, or just more overwhelming being your first time?
More overwhelming because there's a lot going on, especially that I'm not an electronic guy to begin with. And having all this just sat on your lap, you're like, okay, what the hell am I doing here? What does this go to? It's just kind of all about patience and before too long you persevere at work.
How often do you need to clean it?
So I clean it about once every 2 weeks.
Do you want to show us how you clean it?
Yeah. Okay, so essentially I just have a generic can of air duster. And you want to make sure when you are cleaning the computer that you don't want to tip this can over. You want to keep it upright as best as you possibly can. And you want to make sure you read the instructions on the back of the can as well. I just saw it says do not shake. But you just kind of want to go in and maybe hit some of the... So you just kind of want to go through and make sure you hit your trouble areas. I really like to make sure my fans are kind of avoiding dust for the most part. That, of course, is where all your... that one's kind of dusty. But you just kind of want to avoid your fans either blowing in or blowing out, or you want to make sure they're blowing out the dust, of course, but any residue on the fan. And then my main thing is I try to stay away from the motherboard, but I definitely want to get stuff off the power supply and the graphics card at the same time. Another very important point I forgot to mention was that as you're building your computer, you want to try, especially before you have your motherboard in, you want to make sure that you stay away from socks and carpet. You want to try to do it on hardwood because the static electricity will actually fry your motherboard itself, and you'll waste a bunch of time putting together your PC for no apparent reason. I have to start over. It's probably the biggest thing when building it.
Now, you clean your computer so frequently because you have animals, correct?
Correct. A lot of pet hair flying around, and you can never be too careful.
But otherwise, if you don't have animals and you keep your house pretty clean, you don't have to clean your computer as often as you do, right?
Right. It's more of a precautionary thing on my side of things, just because I had a little mishap before, and I just want to make sure that I am completely avoiding that as much as possible.
Right. So how often do you need to clean your keyboard and stuff?
The keyboard, I would say a weekly thing definitely would not hurt. I'm a little behind on that myself, but I'd say a weekly thing to be safe.
And it's just...
I'm just going to do a quick breeze through it, but especially like if you're gaming or something where you might get frustrated, I try to take off all my individual keys, and I have a whole replacement thing of keys in case something happens, but I really try to make sure I get in there and make sure there's no structural thing that's going to cause me to lose a key or something slip for the most part. Here we can see is this is an application called Cam, and it basically allows me to see how my hardware is running as my computer is on. And this will vary depending on what game. Like if I'm running a game, like all these are going to be elevated, of course. But as you can see, like my main focus here, clock speed's a big one too. But right now, I've never had any issues with it. I'd like to see that down a little bit. Pause it. So basically, my clock speed is based off how fast my fans are running. Sorry, that was my threat protection. And as you can see here, my CPU, which is the central processing unit, and that was I don't know if I mentioned it before, but if you would have looked, it's part of the liquid cooler that I was talking about previously. I actually didn't mention it. And then my GPU is that long set-in tablet or square that was kind of set lower off the motherboard towards the bottom. And my RAM, that's actually my hardware. It stands for random access memory. And right now I'm at 30%, which is also my D drive and my little SSD that I mentioned earlier. Currently at 240 gigabytes. So I got a lot more stuff downloaded than I probably should for optimization. Alright, so I'm kind of going to go over the prices of each kind of individual part to give you an idea of what something like this must cost. Off the top of my head, I think altogether I spent in between $1,500 and $2,000 on building this. So my SSD card, that was about $160. this is just a basic keyboard too. It was another $60. My power supply was $100. The SSD card that you saw on the slide in the slots off to the bottom right, it's another $100. And the motherboard itself was $200. The liquid cooler ran me another $100, and then the sticks of RAM were $180. And then part of my CPU, which I run the Intel 7, i7, sorry, was $330. And this case was another $100 added onto that. And I actually had this bundled all together through Amazon, so it was really quick and convenient as far as putting something together. But I individually ordered my GPU, my graphics card, off a different website just because they offered a slightly better deal, just because they were a bigger market that kind of helped people as far as building PCs. So they gave me a little bit of a break on that. And at the time I did build it was when the big Bitcoin, the Bitcoin mining was going on, so graphics cards were kind of outrageous, especially like the higher end ones. Because I actually run a 1070 Ti, and at the time it was one of the better ones on the market. I think the 1080 might have been out at this time, but I think 1070 was about top notch as far as it goes anyway. And then something they don't tell you is that I also had to buy Windows 10, which cost me another $100 when I went along building my PC, because after you're done, it's not programmed into your computer, obviously. For me, overall, building a PC and not having any prior knowledge to what I was doing, per se, it was really insightful. And it really wasn't that hard when I got down to it, but if I wouldn't have had people that knew what they were doing, I would have been a little lost. I'm definitely glad I did. If something does happen, and it's if I happen to be tight on money or something, that I'm pretty confident that I would have at least an idea of what to do in that situation. But as far as the hassle and what I spit, I would probably recommend buying a tower that's already built, and if you want to run games, or sometimes I'll even edit photos on here, whatever you prefer. I would say probably, if you don't have the resources that I do anyway, as far as like friends to help you with it, it's probably not a bad idea to just go ahead and buy a store-bought one. If I could do it again, that's probably the route I would go. Not very handy at all either. But essentially that's my PC.